Hey, Say.
Hey,
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. It's been a long time coming. I watched
Uh-huh.
a lot of your shows.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So this is Laura, aka the Sound Sommelier, talking with Say Adams. Say, what's your earliest memory of hip hop?
Wow. Um, I guess for your, you know, viewers, it's probably the early 70s,
Hmm.
um, when I saw, like Grandmaster Flash and folks like that, sort of DJing and performing in, the park and things like that. So, I guess, mid 70s for, like the sake of having a timeline.
Fair.
A long time.
If it wasn't for the viewers, what would you say?
No, no, no. I mean, that's it. I just sometimes I try to be careful not to go too far back because I've sort of learned that not everybody remembers those things. So I try to keep it in a comfortable range.
Understood. Understood. How did how did being born and raised in Queens influence your style in the beginning and possibly still to this day?
Well, I was actually born in Harlem, New York, and
Hmm.
my family is from the South originally, and then they migrated to Harlem, and then later we migrated to Queens. So, most of my childhood was spent in Queens.
Hmm.
And Queens informed everything about who I was as a young artist. That's where all of my first friendships were developed and things like that. So it was uh, it was a really interesting time back then because very similar to what we're going through right now in New York with COVID. Um, it was a really tough time, and I feel like we're starting to experience some of that now with what's going on with the economy and everybody having to sort of just think on the fly in terms of how to deal with things like not having enough money, and in some cases household things to get by and all of that. So, not that I personally, have fond memories of that, but I just know as a kid, times are much, like, tighter.
Hmm. It's almost like full circle of
Well, yeah, not that I like thinking about it in that way, but it's
it. Right.
definitely familiar,
Hmm.
because I've been on the
Um,
journey.
right. Do you recall who you were with the first time you went bombing or the first location you ever left your Say City tag?
Wow. None of this is going to mean anything to you,
That's not
to your
true.
viewers.
That's not true.
Oh my
If I
goodness.
want to know, I'm pretty sure they do too.
Wow. You know, I never really even um thought about that. But I had I can't believe I just said that. I have two brothers,
Hmm.
and I had a bunch of graffiti friends, and we would all go together. So their names aren't going to resonate with anybody because they stopped writing graffiti you know before the 80s, really. And the folks that I continued to write with later on are people like Lady Pink. I mean, she's definitely somebody that folks would know, but everybody that I came up with, they all stopped eventually.
Got it. Did you ever dabble or pursue an interest in any of the other elements of hip hop? Were you ever an MC?
No, 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 no. I've been an artist my whole life, and so the one thing that I knew by the time I was an active teenager was that I wasn't a rapper, definitely wasn't a break dancer, definitely wasn't a DJ, but I was an artist first and foremost. And I just saw my son Eric is on. That's really exciting.
Oh, nice.
I'm always trying to get him to, pay attention to what's going on,
Mhm.
on social media and hip hop. And, it's interesting to see him on right now because I think he's supposed to be getting ready for work. And so now I'm a little concerned.
Oh. Go to work.
Exactly.
How has your style evolved over the years, or how has it stayed the same?
Well, to me, I think if anything, it stayed the same more. I think now I have he's there and he's at work. Nice.
Perfect.
Now you're making me even more concerned. Go to bed. Big shout out to my man Wayne COD too. It's nice seeing that there are people that are up at this hour. I don't know. I think my style has always been graphic, and so ultimately, I think that's the thing first and foremost that is consistent, over the years. My career spans, well over 40 years, and so that's a very long time to be doing the same sort of thing. But I think that if anything, my graphic sensibility is the one common thread between the time I started as a teenager and sort of where I am now.
Okay. So you said that you didn't have a mentor or someone that took you under their wing early on. Can you talk about a mistake that you learned the most from or that led to some amazing accomplishments and or successes?
Well, the reason I said I didn't have a mentor is because when I was coming up, nobody was really paying much attention to what myself and my friends were doing as graffiti artists. As an artist, I just didn't know anybody else that was making a career out of making art. So that's really what I was talking about first and foremost. I had to figure it out as I went along. But the good thing is I was aware of what a mentor did. And if you were an apprentice, you studied under that person, and eventually, you studied under a master. And eventually, over time, you'd learn so many things that when you struck out on your own, you'd have all the skills and abilities to become a quote unquote professional. And I think ultimately that's the one thing that a lot of young people don't understand is before you go out there in the real world and try to call yourself a professional, you have to, have fallen, quite a bit of times in order to know how to handle every possible situation, whether it's handling clients, making, work large or small, for example, and I don't want to blow anybody up, but, a couple of weekends ago, I was working on this giant Black Lives Matter mural here in Brooklyn. And one of the artists that used to work for me was, the lead artist on the project. And he had never worked on anything of this scale. And it was massive. I don't know if you saw photographs of it. I mean, it's really overwhelming, huge. And these letters were gigantic. But because I had training as a graffiti artist, I understood scale and I knew how to space things out. I mean, so for me, it was just like a top to bottom, end to end, but instead of it being a whole car, it was a whole train.
Right.
And these things were huge. And I knew what to do because of that. And I just sort of gave him and his team direction in terms of how to space the letters out and how to think about it in a much larger way, even though they had, drawings and schematics and, tape measures and all of that. But it's a whole different thing if you've never done it before. And I've painted murals on the ground. I painted them up on walls. Like, there isn't a problem that comes up as it relates to art that I have not faced at some point in my career.
It's in Bed-Stuy, right?
Yes, it's in Bed-Stuy at the Billie Holiday Theater, and it is blocked off from all commercial traffic thanks to Mayor De Blasio.
Amazing. I saw that picture when he was there. Hopefully it's still there when I can get out there.
Yeah, yeah, it's blocked off all summer. So and then the mural is after that it's in the street, but
Mhm.
hopefully it'll be there.
One of the pieces from your Trusted Brand series instantly called to mind Jasper Johns, who I studied many years ago in college. Was he an early influence of yours?
Well, I feel like first I have to acknowledge the passing of Milton Glaser, who was a teacher of mine for many, many years, even though I had never actually met him. But he
Mhm.
was always an inspiration. And so I'll start by saying that. Um, uh, as it relates to Jasper Johns, yes, definitely he was an inspiration. And so the idea behind Trusted Brands was when I was creating this body of work, I wanted to honor brands that were popular when I was a kid and brands that I thought just literally stood the test of time. And that's why, the series is called Trusted Brands. And I thought, well, what's the number one brand in America? The American flag.
Mhm.
And I said, well, if I'm going to do this, I have to give an homage to Jasper Johns because he was the first person that made art of the American flag that I saw. And then later, I saw David Hammons did a red, black, and green flag, which I thought was pretty cool.
Mhm.
So, when I thought about doing it, I was originally thinking about Jasper Johns. And although he was working in caustic, I decided I was going to do collage. And really, the idea was to put a contemporary spin on what he had done because I imagine most of the people that are looking at my work may not be familiar with what he did, especially if they're younger. But that was where the original idea came from. It was
Yeah,
inspired by Jasper Johns.
I'm really proud of myself that I remembered caustic. I didn't want to say it just in case I was wrong, but when you said it just now, I was like, oh, okay, I was paying attention. So I'm almost one of 3,000 backers, anxiously awaiting her copy of the Smithsonian Anthology of Hip Hop and Rap. How is this project different to others that you've worked on?
Well, for starters, we're working under a lot of duress,
I
you
can
know.
believe it.
But this is what I like to call a legacy project.
Mhm.
Working with the National Museum of African American History and Culture has been a dream for me. Just the idea of making work with a cultural institution like that is huge. And having the opportunity to make something that is going to reach instant eyeballs in the tens of thousands is just it's amazing to be able to have an opportunity like that. So
Yeah.
say that first. But the project is coming along. We're on schedule. I will say that the hope is that they are going to be ready, finished, and printed by winter of 2020. So, for the holidays.
Mhm.
And we're on schedule. I will just say that.
No rush. Can't rush greatness. Speaking of the Smithsonian, you've said the One Nation mural you created during the 3-day festival celebrating the opening of the museum was the most emotional thing you've ever experienced outside of your son being born. How did you prepare for such an important event?
Well, one of the things that was really fascinating about doing that is, as you know, they have all these street art mural festivals. And so when I was working on that in 2016, I was on tour doing a bunch of different mural festivals. And like being in a band, you go from city to city to city to city to city. But when you're in the studio, you have to prepare for every one of those towns that you're going to hit. And so
Mhm.
I literally have to map out what the drawing is that I'm going to do in any given city. I have to figure out what the scale is, what the materials are going to be, have all of my, list of paints my assistants, you know, meals, petty cash, wherever I'm going to be lodging at, all of it. All of that
Mhm.
has to be done in advance before you hit that town. And then magnify that by throwing Washington, D.C. in the mix and having to deal with Secret Service for clearance on certain things, agents, um, you know, a new crew of assistants that I've never worked with, a whole team of volunteers, and then it's also the biggest stage that I've ever worked on.
Mhm.
But I don't even have time to think about it because I have to go to Detroit before that, and I have to go to you know, Minnesota before that, and you know, I'm hitting all of these different cities, and it's literally a stop on a tour, but it's a
Mhm.
big stop, and it was emotionally overwhelming because I understood the magnitude of making this giant black American flag in
Mhm.
front of, you know, tens of thousands of eyeballs that are there also to, you know, see the ribbon cutting ceremony with the president. And I'm making something right in front of him in real time over 3 days. But all the prep had to be in place because I couldn't leave to go get anything like I normally can when I'm on site, um, and on location. But when I'm in any given city, there are runners that can go out and get things, but
Mhm.
not here. Once I'm there, I'm locked in for the rest of the day. And it was challenging, but you know, I've done this before, and so I did my homework. And I also know that I can make anything happen on the fly if I have to, and
Mhm.
nobody will be any the wiser. But what was really challenging about doing this was I didn't anticipate being emotionally exhausted and losing my voice
Oh.
because I didn't expect to be talking so much. I saw my little friend Rachel Zern. Hey. Um, and that was one of the things that I just didn't anticipate. It was just
Mhm.
really, really tricky. And before the weekend was over, I was completely exhausted. And every morning, you know, I'd have to get up, dust myself off, and get back out there and do it again, and just be in the moment and not be caught up in, you know, a wave of nostalgia because,
Mhm.
you know, I got a job to do.
Right. You said it was a stop on the tour. Was it the final stop, or did you have to go to another city after that?
No, no,
Exhausted.
it was the final
Oh,
stop.
okay.
The final
The
for
grand
that
finale.
week. For that week.
Okay. Right. What did it mean to be asked to design the custom logo graphic for Google's celebration of the 44th anniversary of hip hop?
Um, at the time, not that much. I didn't really understand the magnitude of it. I have to be honest. When the Google team approached me, you know, I have a really close friend who's a senior executive at Google, and he approached me about doing it. And I just, you know, it wasn't even a matter of yes or no. You know, when he asks, you're doing it. And it sort of hit me later how important it was. And so the Google team flew to New York and they came to my studio, and they basically just outlined this whole program, and it was all of the you know, cultural pioneers in hip hop. It wasn't just me. It was Fab Five Freddy, and you know, I can't even begin to name all of these folks because I'm going to miss so many of them. But a lot of them were cultural pioneers. I'll just say that, and it was a huge honor because, you know, I was, you know, being asked to create a graphic that was going to represent hip hop's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's sort of funny to think of hip hop as being, you know, at the time 44 years old. And this is, you know, the first time anybody had celebrated, you know, hip hop's birthday as an old man or an old woman or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
it was really wonderful to be asked to do that. And so um, that was, you know, for me, a huge challenge just being asked to do that. But, you know, I thought it was just, you know, it was great.
Okay. So I have a copy of the mashup that's on a shelf in my office in Midtown, or I would bring it out. Where did the idea from the book come from?
Wow, where did the idea come from?
Did you and Jeanette come up with it together, or?
You know what? I'm trying to be kind here. It was my idea, and I
Okay.
pitched it to Jeanette, and I hoped that she would say yes, and she did. Um, but first and foremost, her photography is really beautiful, and I thought I
Mhm.
wanted to figure out a way to honor the work first because those images needed to be in front of people, and that was as far as I thought about it in the beginning. And I just knew I wanted to reach out to all of my graffiti and street art friends. And, naturally, I'd worked with a lot of the musicians, back in the day at Def Jam. And I just thought it was the perfect mix. And she was kind enough to sort of allow all of these folks to paint on top of her photographs. And
Mhm.
it was just great. I don't think either one of us thought it was going to be as amazing as it was. But just the opportunity to work with my old friend Crash and Part and T Kid and Pink. Oh man. And it was also a chance for my son Eric and I to work together, and we'd never done that before.
Amazing.
And it was just great. Everybody came to the party. Absolutely everybody. And I hope we get an opportunity to do a volume 2 because there's so many
Mhm.
people like, Wayne COD that I would love to have work on a piece like that. Um, and it's just the kind of thing that sort of keeps on giving. Zephyr and Revolt were a part of it. Just there's so many people that I came up with. Jester, oh my goodness, like I've loved this guy my whole life, and to get an opportunity to do something with him was a huge treat. Claw Money, Alice Mizrachi, just everybody. Oh man.
Love it. You remixed Pabst Blue Ribbon's logo, which appeared on 150 million cans. What went into the decision to apply your modern collage-based aesthetic to such vintage imagery?
Well, the strange thing is, this is going to sound a little nuts, but I had a dream about working with Paps about 2 weeks before
Wow.
they approached me. And I just thought, this has got to be something that I have to do. And then literally about a week later, I got a phone call from a buddy of mine that has an agency, and he says, I got a client that I think you'd be perfect to work with. And it turned out to be Paps. And
That's
I could
crazy.
not have been happier. And we just, and like I said, it sounds like it's hard to believe, but it really did happen that way.
Mhm.
And maybe I sort of visualized it and brought it, into being just by conjuring it up, even though, I'm not a traditional beer drinker. But if I am going to work with a brand like Paps, what better company to be a part of than something like that?